What is it that makes a people rich? What is it that makes a people economically sound and powerful? It is business and industry. It means that you have to produce something. If you have a particular culture, then you can produce things to supply that culture, that cultural need. If you have a holiday, such as St. Patrick's Day, the Irish people make a great deal of money on St. Patrick's Day because they have factories and businesses which produce green flowers and green hats, and they produce all kinds of special drinks for that holiday. And so a holiday then means that this is a time when your people can produce something that you need, something that you are going to wear. If you are going to celebrate Memorial Day, and you are going to celebrate all of your ancestors who are buried in Africa, and you do have ancestors who are buried in Africa, wouldn't you think? You do have ancestors, because you didn't just start in the cotton fields of America as a race of people. We didn't just come out of the ground in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, or Virginia. We came from someplace, and we had, obviously, parents there. Many children were on the slave ships. Many children your age were captured, you know. You saw Roots, And that boy was about your age. And so there were many, many children on those ships coming over here, and they had parents. In some cases, their parents were with them in other sections of the ship, because whole towns were captured over there. It was a terrible time. Whole towns were captured. Everybody was rounded up, put in chains, and marched down to the coast, put on ships, and sailed over here. Well, the important thing is there were families over there, and so they had people who had deceased over there. And so you have ancestors. And so what you do, what every people do, is to call on their ancestors from very ancient times. And when you call on your ancestors every Memorial Day, you do a little ceremony, you go to the cemetery, you put a flag there, and then maybe after that you go on a picnic and you eat. But it's all done in the name of your ancestors. What we do at the African village, we do that in an African form. That's only natural, because we're people who've come from Africa. Our ancestors came from Africa. The Chinese and the Japanese will celebrate Memorial Day by celebrating Chinese ancestors, their ancestors who are buried in China, or the ancestors who are buried in Japan. We have to celebrate our ancestors who are buried here, or rather over there in Africa. And so how do we do that? There is the problem. How do you do it? What do you do? And if you don't know, and if your leaders cannot teach you, if they cannot show you and demonstrate on television what you do, if they cannot declare that this is the great celebration of our ancient ancestors, and you will now put a bowl of water there, and you will light a special lamp for your ancestors, well, you will not know what to do. But if you do celebrate your ancestors, and you dress in African clothes on that day, that means that if there are 60 million African Americans in the United States, more than 60 million garments would have to be made if everybody's wearing African clothes on that Memorial Day, And that's how you get an industry. You produce the things that you need for your special days. Your special days are the days in which you celebrate yourself. What day do we celebrate being African? The Chinese have their New Year, and they celebrate being Chinese on that day. They begin every year by celebrating being Chinese. And the Jewish people, who have, of course, their New Year, the Jewish New Year, they also celebrate being Jewish. When do you celebrate being African? And so we then will have to establish those days, No one's going to do that for you. The leadership of the Japanese announced to the Japanese when the Japanese New Year or the Japanese festival is going to take place. And same thing among the Jewish people. The African New Year takes place on the 21st of March. 21st and 22nd and 23rd is 3-day celebration. And so that becomes one of the first things which you should know. Be prepared on that day to put on your African attire. Be prepared on that day then to celebrate your African name. Each of you must have a last name which is an African name. And before we leave here, hopefully sometime today, every one of you should have an African name. You should have an African name. And we see that our director is telling us to wind it up. But the important thing is that you are going to have something that by the end of this 10-year period, you will be strong, you will be economically sound. You will not just grow up and look for a job, you will grow up to go into business.
Sure.
We want you to grow up to go into business, not to look for a job. That means you're ready to do something for someone else. And so in that 10-point program, which hopefully we're going to get a chance again to talk to you about it, we have something that we want you to do. But first we want you to have an African name. We want you to prepare to wear on March the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd African attire. We want you at Memorial Day to be prepared to celebrate an African worship of the ancient ancestors. Same way the Chinese people do, the Japanese people do, the Korean people do, the English people do, believe it or not. The Irish people do. Every people celebrate their ancestors by celebrating their native country that they came from. We're going to also give you a nationality. And if you got a paper and pencil, write down Yoruba. Y-O-R-U-B-A. We studied the Yoruba people, and we found that they lived in big cities just like you do here, so that their culture can be easily transported over here. On that note, we have to conclude.
I think they would like, before we wrap it up, if you could share.